Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar on Improvised Lighting on Tour presented by Juan Trevino. My name is Laura Lawrence and I'm the Global Marketing Director at Harman. So just a few things before we get started. Everyone on the call is muted to keep down noise levels during the webinar. However, there is a chat function where you can submit questions to the presenter and he'll try to answer as many questions as possible at the end. This webinar is being recorded and the link will be made available a few days after this presentation. We do have a number of other webinars taking place over the next few months for audio, lighting, video, and control, and we'd like to encourage you to take a look at the different webinars in our Learning Sessions Workshop series on pro.harman.com, as well as visiting Harman Professional University to see our many on-demand and certification courses that are available to you for free. And now I'd like to introduce you to Juan Trevino, the presenter for today's webinar. Since starting his career at a venue called the Canopy Club, Juan has worked as a lighting designer for artists including Midas and Elefante. Juan recently began a series of festival appearances providing lighting design for Subtronics. Now I'll pass it over to you, Juan.
Thanks, Laura. I just want to thank Martin Lighting for having me, and I want to say thank you to all of you who decided to tune in. So let's get started here. Okay. To begin, this presentation is going to be geared towards beginner to intermediate skill levels in regards to lighting design. As I move through the presentation, the difficulty of the subject matter will be progressively increased. So at the beginning, I'm just going to be talking about just how my file is laid out and generally the sorts of things I do to make it easier for myself day to day while I'm working out on tour. All the information today that I will be presenting will be presented via the Grand MA2 software, the OnPC software. It is free for anyone to be able to download for themselves off of the Grand MA website. So today we're going to be going over my show file, like I said. We're going to be diving into where and why I store the different types of cues that I use daily. And in addition to all that, this is a 100% punted show file. So I'm going to be getting into what that specifically means here in a minute. And then the final goal of the presentation is going to be cloning and the general concepts that I personally use in my show file from the very beginning. Like when I start a file, I started out thinking about how cloning is going to be used regularly within the file. It proves to be quite beneficial to be thinking about this from the beginning. So moving forward, what is punting? So punting for me, it's my favorite sort of method of going about running lighting. So punting itself, or busking, is a term that we use in the industry to describe the improvisational use of lighting at a concert setting. Why would we punt? When working with a client who decides to change their setup regularly, so what that means for me on my most recent tour was my client, Jesse Carter, Subtronics. He regularly would move songs around. He would regularly be working on tracks, and then those tracks would be in development over the course of the tour. So then we would get, we would have new drops, new sequences, just a new flow of the set almost daily. So through that, I, as the designer, operator, and programmer, would need to regularly think on my feet and change the set while following his lead. So the trade-off of this operation, this type of show operation, which is punting or busking, versus cue stacking or time coding, is that you're offered a lot more freedom on the fly to do what you find that would be most fitting for a particular moment. A fun little side note is when I first heard the term busking or punting was in an email thread with my first tour manager. They basically were just listing what my duties were going to be, and one of them was busking, to which I had no idea what that word even meant. It turned out it's what I had been doing my entire career at the time, and at the time I had just been working at the Canopy Club, which is a small venue in Champaign, Illinois, so central Illinois. And I had taught myself how to create a show file in the Martin MPC software, which actually much of my current layouts and how I run my show is derived from that original show file that I had originally written in the Martin MPC software. Moving on, so this here is my show file layout for the Grand M82. This is the on PC software, like I said before, and currently what we're looking at is how I laid it out for us to most easily see how I would be running it on an actual desk. The desk that I use while I'm out on tour is a Grand MA2 Lite, which is a physical console. It has 15 executors, so it's got 15 faders and then a whole bunch of buttons surrounding it. Three different touch screens, two of which are the main ones that we can see up here, screen 2 and screen 3. These are where I do most of my work, and then we have my screen 1, which is actually just this little fader bank. Moving along, what we have here are my faders, and so my faders are on the left-hand side here, and my layout view is on the right. So for those of us who don't know what a layout view is, in this particular instance, it is a 2D digital representation of a lighting rig. This particular lighting rig doesn't actually exist in the real world. It is 100% meant to be cloned from, to be used as each fixture here is a placeholder for data, for information that I use for dimmer chases, movement patterns, just intensity bumps, and just all of the lighting information that one would normally be using throughout their show file. It's all just right here, and none of it actually pertains to real fixtures in the real world. What I've gone and done here is I always have my faders color coordinated to match everywhere throughout my show file what the corresponding fixture type is. So for instance here, I've got 3 different red faders here. And these red faders specifically are pertaining to the axioms in my show file. If we look from the left to the right-hand side here for my layout view, all of the red fixtures, all the red squares or rectangles are different axioms. So everything up top would be what an imaginary flown rig, and then everything on the bottom would be an imaginary ground package. So the flown rig would be what you normally see in a venue or a festival, it's flown via like chain motors. Then what's on the ground here is like a ground deployed package, so something that could easily be deployed from day to day usage. You know, you put it on a truck, you take it off, you build it as quickly as you can, and then you use it inside of a venue. Then what I have here in teal or cyan are my washes, which are auras. Next are my blinders in a seafoam green, which are in the center right here. My strobes, which are in orange, all right up here. And then my downstage watch, which is actually not a part of my clone, because from day to day they range from so many different types of fixtures, as well as where my artist is standing, if we have him on a riser or not. If he's running around, when he's going to be running around, and where he's running around. I have to focus the sorted downstage fixtures that are located inside the venue to reflect all of the things that I just mentioned. Everything that is in this blue here, so my gobo scroll, gobo rotate, and zoom are what I call sort of special effects that I use day to day. So there are specific functions that the lights that I use have that I like using for build-ups or drops. So a gobo scroll is literally taking your gobo wheel and scrolling it. The gobo rotation is where the gobo wheel itself, each individual gobo is rotating. And then zoom, it's something as simple as just taking the sort of aperture of your or the iris rather, of your fixture and just tightening it or widening it. Then over here in this magenta color, we have my speeds. So these are for the effects that I use very regularly. So the intensity speed is actually for dimmer chases, which I'll get into more in a second. And then the movement speed is for movement, movement speed of my movement patterns that I've gone and created, which I will also get into more detail shortly. The final fader here, fader 15, is my position stack. It is the only Q stack that I actually have in my whole show file, and it is dedicated to just bouncing around my assorted positions as quickly as I can. I will get more into that shortly. Down here on the bottom of my fader page are my what I call bump buttons for my dimmer chases. So everything in white, as you can see right here, corresponds with everything. It's all of the fixtures in my file that would be affected by my dimmer chases are, and that's why they're in white. It color coordinating everything. It really helps me keep track of what's where, and it allows me to more quickly and efficiently, one, locate the cues that I'm looking for, as well as two, be able to edit them on the fly if needed. So the dimmer chases that I have here go from, they're all waveforms. So the first one here is a sine wave, then I have a cosine, a ramp, a PWM, and a chase. All of them, for me, just because it's a preference, are done symmetrically. So they're either coming from outside to in, or inside to out, or stage center to stage left to stage right, or stage left to stage right to stage center, if you would. Each one of these are flash toggles, or how I would describe it, and that basically means that I will push the button and it will be on, and when I let go, it turns off. I do the same thing for all of these different faders that I have up here, because well, I can push my fader up and it'll keep the information, or I pull it back and it turns it off, and otherwise I can just sit there and essentially use my fixtures as an instrument, if you would. I push the button, it turns it on, I let go and it turns it off. It's as simple as that for how I actually am running the show daily. Moving along here, we can see that I have in red and in the cyan color here, movers and washes. So the movers would be my axioms and the washes are my auras. They're generalized here because daily I find that when cloning, the fixtures aren't always axioms and they're not always auras. But like I said before, the fixtures in my show file, they're placeholders for information. So I write the file, I play with it, I get everything done in a 3D, and then I am able to take all of those different cues, all those fun looks that I made, all the different colors, and all the stuff, and then I just clone those attributes over onto whatever fixtures are in the house rigs or the festival designs, and I'm able to go and effectively and easily run what would have otherwise been a really complicated and different show the exact same way that I would every other day, because all my buttons are sitting exactly where they always were in the first place. Moving on. So what we have here is my screen 1. This would be the small screen on the right-hand side of the desk. All of these faders here are actually they're digital faders, so they don't have any physical, for me anyway, any physical faders to be adjusting them with, but using a touchscreen, I am able to push them up and down. So each one of them is a different color palette that I found over the course of tour that I would use often, and they go and match with assorted different cues, whether they be verbal or actual music cues that my artist went and made. So on this particular tour with Subtronics, I had asked him if he had any preferences on color palettes or just like general like tones or moods throughout the show, and he basically gave you complete creative freedom over all of that, which is it's quite a bit to try to tackle. So I found that over the course of more and more shows that there were palettes that I really liked using for particular songs or moments. Like, for instance, here I have one that's labeled Level Up. Level Up is the name of my artist, of Subtronics' girlfriend. She is also a DJ, and he would play some of her tracks throughout the set. So he'd say, hey, give it up for Level Up, and I would like to switch my palette very quickly. And so I would use this particular cue to highlight when he said that, and then he'd immediately go into something else. So then I'd pop over into another color palette almost immediately after he said that. Then we also have this one here labeled Grizztronics. So this is a rather popular track by Subtronics, and I found that I really liked the palette that I was using for it. And so when he'd pop over into, say, he's transitioning over into that song, he uses iconic bass line from it, I push that up, to which then we have now transitioned visually into that new track. And then another example here of just what these generally are is lighten up versus angry. So lighten up here is how I would go and literally lighten the mood. It's like we're doing something light and twinkly and sort of fun, and then angry is when this artist is a dubstep artist. So dubstep is really, it's the metal of electronic music, probably, is the way that I'd like to describe it. And we popped from being very light and chill to angry and moody very, very quickly. So those are the sorts of things that I'd be using to quickly transition from one palette to another. And this isn't the only way that I create my palettes either. I will move on to that when we get to screen 2, actually. But yeah, so these are what I found that I used most often, or they were the most complicated palettes. Down here on the bottom, what we have are my executor buttons. They're X keys 1 through 20. They're located directly underneath screen 1 on the Grand MA. These first ones that I have right here are what I call intensity bumps. So what they pertain to is G1 and G2 are two different fixture groupings that I would use from day to day. And so it's basically something like every other fixture. So let's see, if I pop back here, we can see this. So an example of what G1 would be is these two inner fixtures, this fixture here, and this fixture here. Then G2 would be the inverse of that. And then if you just apply that same sort of philosophy to the entirety of the lighting rig, you have what G1 and G2 is. So then I'd use those same sort of presets from my groups to create my different color palettes, my positions, my gobos, like where I put my gobos, and yeah. Then over here I have in and out, and those are, it's the same idea. They're also intensity bumps. So you push them and it toggles it on and toggles it off, and just bounces back and forth between what fixtures are presently on and off. And then since I use them to create my color palettes as well, I can just be holding one of them, and then as soon as I let go and pop to the other, it creates a completely different palette because I've used them from the very beginning to create my palettes. So it's inverse, if you would. It's the opposite of one another. Right here are my strobes. So these are all the strobes that I have in the show total that I actually use, strobe buttons. We can see here that I've labeled them dim no, and then this one's dim yes. So this is literally a white strobe, a yellow strobe, a blue, a green, and a blue. But if I push them, it does not turn on the lights themselves in the rig. I need to actually go and push up the fader for whatever light that could be. So let's say it's my axioms, I push up the actual fader that controls the intensity for that grouping of fixtures, and then I could see its strobe in that particular color. The final one I have here is an all strobe. So when I click on it, it actually goes and pushes the intensity out of the entire rig and makes the entire thing strobe. So it kind of is an override, if you would, for these other keys that I have here. Over here in Violet, I always, like I said before, like to keep I color coordinate everything, so I know what's where, and if I ever have to explain to someone what button to push, it's easier to say push the purple one than push up what I have abbreviated for up, up, down, down, or up, down, or circle bounce, which is confusing to even listen and say. So what these specifically are my movement patterns. The movement patterns that I have here are what I would use from day to day, and they are controlled by this speed master here, which is labeled as movement speed, which is contained on the faders that I would have to my left-hand side, where these buttons here are on my right-hand side. So I can be popping around from movement pattern to movement pattern and be adjusting the speed simultaneously. The reason that I have physical buttons for my movement patterns is specifically because of how often Subtronics would change the music that he was playing. So like clockwork with this particular artist, every 16 measures or so, he would change either beat patterns or tracks entirely. So what that means is I have to find a way to effectively highlight that without being overwhelming. So what I found that made the most sense is I would use these movement patterns. And all these movement patterns are subject to change based on the position that the rig is currently inside of. Moving along here, what I have also are my prism options. So prism on just for all, prism out, and prism in. So these are toggles. So when I push it, it turns it on and stays on, and if I push it again, it'll turn it off. Versus all the flash toggles that I've otherwise described. The same thing goes for all the movement patterns. Those are also toggles. Okay. So now what we have here is screen 2. So screen 2 is my first larger screen, which is on my upper right-hand side. And what this consists of mostly is my color picker, movement pattern, excuse me, my positions for the entirety of the rig, and my gobos here. So right here, this color picker is actually generated by a plugin that I purchased from a guy who makes plugins named Giaffo. Giaffo has managed to completely streamline the process of making a color picker, which in Grand MA takes a very long time. It's a lot of just macros. And each one of these corresponds with a different grouping that I have in the rig. So the first one I have here is all, so obviously it's just going to affect the entirety of the rig. Then we've got G1, which is what I was describing earlier. It's like the every other fixture. Same thing with G2, it's every other, but just in the opposite direction. All in, all out. So I can effectively with this quickly and easily completely change whatever my color palette is. I just more or less have to have the foresight to be changing this immediately when the song changes or the mood changes. So that can, as you can see, can get it can be a little overwhelming. I've got adjusted to it and know what palettes I really like using and how I like to build them, and I just happen to like building them on the fly, which is in itself a part of punting. Moving along here, what I have right here are my positions. All of these are on a 10-second fade time. This is specifically because I really like having the option to adjust the fade time from a longer fade to start off with. So if it's starting off at 10 seconds and I want to push it to be even longer, I can jump it up to 20 versus starting it off as like a snap value, and I click it and it just jumps straight to that position. I can let these edit this nice slow fade to wherever it is that I'm going with the position and with my positions in the set. Then down here, these are all snap values. They're gobo, they're gobo options. There's 7 gobos. It's just I've always just used 7, and it's something I just continue to use. And I'm able to on the fly choose the gobos that I would like to use. It does affect the entirety of the rig, and yeah, moving along. This is screen 3. So screen 3 is on my left-hand side, and what we can see that I have here in the upper left-hand corner is a clock, so I know roughly when we're starting the set. Right here's a stopwatch, so I'm timing the set so that I know generally where we are and how much more time we have, and I can tell if there's a problem. Sometimes we'd have audio issues, or my artist is having some sort of issues with something on stage, and I can tell when something's going wrong because if we're going over or something's not happening roughly when I would expect it to be, I can see it from there. There's also been times where he would turn to me, my artist that is, and ask, hey, how long did my set run today? Did I run short? Did I run long? And it just was really helpful for me to be able to keep track of how long the set was going. Mind you, this is not a time code clock or anything like that. It's literally just a stopwatch. Then right here, what we have are some additional executor buttons that are dedicated to snap values for my positions, which is what I was describing previously on this screen here. So these are fade values for the exact same positions as right here, but these are snap ones. So the reason that I have them like this is because I like to be able to jump around really quickly from position to position. It's something where essentially, and if you've ever seen any of the sets that I've done, I would black out the rig, turn it back on, and you'd see me in a different position. I'd black it out, turn it back on, and it's something I do very quickly. So I'd turn it off, turn it back on, and just keep moving. And what you'd see is like the rig doing this sort of, almost, I don't want to use the word seizing. It's just jumping from position to position, and it creates a really nice looking effect. Next, what I have right here are additional executor buttons which are dedicated to some more quick and on-the-fly color palettes. This is just in case something happens in the set where I really wasn't expecting it and I want to jump to a different color very quickly. What we have is all of these are going to be done in my group 1, my G1 and G2 presets. So we've got white and green, orange and white, green and cyan, yellow and green, red and yellow, orange and cyan, yellow and violet, and then these are in 3s, and they're definitely going to be all over the place in whatever way that I thought was most aesthetically pleasing. So we've got green, blue, orange, orange, magenta, and yellow, and orange, blue, and white. Finally, everything that's listed down here is actually all of the faders from this page. It's because this screen actually lives directly above those physical faders on a Grand MA2 light. Moving along here. So these, okay, so the tools of the trade. These are all the fixtures that I regularly use as my base, my placeholders for all the information in my show file. We have got the Martin Mac Axiom, the Martin Mac Aura, and the Martin Atomic Recays. The reason that I picked these fixtures was specifically because they're very versatile. They are standardized fixtures that I see very regularly in festival rigs, as well as the vendor that I use, LEC in Chicago, is a Martin vendor, and they carry these fixtures, so I see them a lot on in a bunch of my quotes for the rigs that I'm trying to build. The Axiom is a very high output fixture. It is meant to compete with the Martin Mac Viper. It's got a smaller footprint, and it is, I'd say, almost as bright, if not as bright as a Viper. And it pulls less power. It's actually a really wonderful fixture. The Martin Mac Auras, they are quite bright as well. They have a nice focus range. You're able to see them really well. I use them more for eye candy, but pretty much all of my fixtures, I use them more so for eye candy rather than as something to make it so that you actually see the artist. This is specifically because I work with DJs, and DJs inherently, where they came from were basements or nightclubs or whatever, where they're not used to being seen themselves, and they get a little self-conscious about being seen. This doesn't go for every client that I've had, but I find this to happen a lot with openers that I work with, where they just do not want a downstage wash pointing at them. They don't want to be seen. Finally, what I have here is the Martin Atomic 3K strobe. This is an LED strobe, so I'm able to pick out colors for it. I can easily clone onto other more complicated fixtures that could potentially be causing me issues. And yeah, so these are the fixtures that I keep in my show file. The only one that's not listed would be just a generic blinder, and it's just a 2-channel it's a mole that just basically turns on and turns off. All right, next. Cloning. All right, so this is the real bread and butter of what this presentation is going to be. This is essentially where it's actually going to start getting complicated. I'm going to go as slowly as I can, but it's a lot. So I'm just going to start. What is cloning? Cloning is the method that lighting professionals use to copy attributes from one light to another. So this would be where I'm taking the values that I put inside of my placeholder lights that we already went over and copying those values and that information onto actual physical lights that are contained within lighting rigs, whether they be in venues or festival rigs, or it could even be a tour rig that I'm using. I'll clone the values that I will created there onto what I am presently using on that day. Why clone? This practice is essential for touring personnel to efficiently use a house lighting rig, which will allow the user to use the house lighting rig as their own. So, excuse me. Essentially, we're able to take all that work and all that time that we spent creating the show file that we've been using to and be able to effectively actually use it in a real world scenario, a real world situation. So you could go download the Grand MA on PC software, sit there, create a nice elaborate lighting rig, and then be able to create and be able to work efficiently on the day when you go into this venue. You don't have all the time in the world to sit there and program this whole giant light show because you only have a couple hours, maybe, if you're lucky, depending on where you are, depending on if you're at a festival or in a venue or yeah. Moving along, preparation for cloning. There's no one right way to do anything when it comes to doing this. What's important is understanding how to effectively choose source fixtures and destination fixtures. A source fixture is a fixture that has all the programming information you created ahead of time. A destination fixture is a newly patched fixture located in a venue that has no show data. So when I say newly patched, I mean that the fixture is new to your show file. It's not necessarily a new fixture in existence or in general. It's something new to you and your operating. Okay. So this is how I'm going to be trying to explain this as accurately and simply as I can. We have two layout views here. One we've already seen, which is for my clone rig, which is inside of my base show file. And then the other one is destination, my destination fixtures. So this particular example is based off a lighting design at a venue called the Ogden Theater in Denver, Colorado. What I've gone and done is correspond the colors here for the destination rig as best I can to the colors of my source rig. So all the red fixtures are going to be cloned onto these red fixtures. So my axioms are going to get cloned onto these vipers. And all of my cyan fixtures here, all of my auras are going to get cloned onto these auras right here. Then I went and highlighted all of these other stationary washes in a magenta because they aren't actually, I don't have a fixture that's specifically those inside of my show file, but I will be using my auras to clone onto these rush pars from my show file onto the house rig. Moving along here, so we've got so like I said before, we're going to start off simply and move into we're going to progressively get more difficult. So we have my source here. And we've got my upstage right here and my downstage right here. So these are upstage fixtures and these are downstage fixtures. Then right here are my destination fixtures. So the syntax, when it comes to cloning in Grand MA, you have multiple options in how you would like to be able to input the data and be actually going and cloning in the show file. The way that I do it is via the command line. So my example here is clone my source fixture at the destination fixture. So where I'm going with this is clone fixture 3,304 through 3,307, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it's this fixture right here through this fixture right here at 201 through 204. So these fixtures right here, which are imaginary, are going to get all of their placeholder data put onto these fixtures, which are actually in the real world. And right here is what the GUI looks like for the cloning screen in Grand MA. And what we can see here is I'm cloning fixtures 3,304 through 3,307 at fixtures 201 through 204, please. So we can see that from the syntax that I wrote right here, that it has effectively gone and will be transferring the data to each corresponding fixture in the order that I wanted it to. Moving along. So what we have here again, there are my source fixtures up on top and my destination fixtures here down on the bottom. These source fixtures here are my axioms, which we've seen a whole bunch of times so far throughout this presentation, and down here are the vipers in the house rig. The reason that they're stagnated like this whole design right here is actually what is present in the house rig on the day of show. So right here we've got fixtures 105 through 108, and then right here we got 101 through 104. So right here is my upstage, and right here is my downstage. You can tell this by, well, everything in the show file starts off with upstage on the bottom and downstage on the top. So yet again, we're going to go with our syntax here, which is a clone source fixture at our destination fixture. So the example here for our upstage, which is right here, I'm going to be cloning fixture 3,303 through 3,103 through 3,106. So we got 3 right here, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3 through 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these fixtures right here are going to be sending their values onto 101 through 104. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, sorry, I miswrote the syntax. It's got to be clone fixture 3,104 through fixture 3,107. The reason that all my fixtures are in the 3,000 range, which is making it a bit of a tongue twister for me to say it, is because I regularly find that when I'm designing additional rigs that I'm inevitably cloning all of my data onto, or I'm dealing with large festival rigs, that their numbering systems can go all the way up into the 2000s sometimes. And I want to make sure that my rig is as far away from those numbers as I possibly can, because I don't want to have to adjust and remember and rememorize where these fixtures are in the show file. So also, you might be wondering, why is it that I am deciding to clone from one end to the other versus just going 101 through 104, or excuse me, 101 through 108. 1 second here. 101 through 108 rather than just picking out the fixtures in the center here and cloning straight onto it. It's because I have a lot of symmetrical dimmer chases and movement patterns in my show file, and if you go and clone just across like this by your rows, so my upstage versus my downstage, it'll actually keep that symmetry that you wouldn't created, that I wouldn't created in the first place, and it makes it so that I don't have to update those movement patterns. So then what I have for my downstage here is clone fixture 3101 plus 3102 plus, this is where we're weird. I jump over here to 3109, which is right here, and 3110 at 105 through 108. So what I've done here is I picked my innermost fixtures and cloned into the innermost fixtures on the destination rig, and I picked my outermost fixtures and cloned onto the outermost fixtures on the clone rig. Moving along. Okay, there we go. Okay, this is where it's actually going to start getting kind of complicated. So we're going to clone my upstage fixtures first, which I have 3,301 through 3,310 at 501 through 510, which are these guys right here. So I've got my upstage cloning onto my upstage. And it fits in really nicely because I've got a total of 10 fixtures in my source and a total of 10 fixtures in my destination. Next, we've got my downstage, which are going to be these fixtures onto, okay, these guys, right up here. So I clone fixture 3,404, so I start 1, 2, 3, 4 right here, through 3,411, so 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, at all of these fixtures right here. So then they fit in really nicely. So I skim off the fixtures on the ends and just put in the remainder onto the destination fixtures. All right. Now for the mid-stage center specifically, which are fixtures 515 through 526. So we've got them right here. So 515 all the way through 526. So that's a total of 4, 8, 12 fixtures. I'm going to be using, in this particular example, my downstage, my downstage fixtures. So I do 3,402, which starts right here, through 3,413, which ends right here, at all of these fixtures right here. So 515 through 526. So it takes up all those values, like I said before, and just puts them right there. Next, we've got my mid-stage right and my mid-stage left right here. So we've got cloning. So this is hands down the most complicated syntax that I will be talking about today. And the reason that I wrote it in such a way is so that we can see on my next slide here how you're able to effectively use the command line to be able to go and translate the data quickly versus just cloning 511 through 514 at these 4 fixtures, then also doing these the last 4 over here onto these last 4. So instead, what I did was clone fixture 3,301 through 3,304. So it is these 4 fixtures here, plus 3,307 through 3,310. So we skipped the inner 2 and just jumped to the last ones at 511, which is right here, through 514. So that's where that grouping is, plus this grouping. So that is 527 through 530. So if we actually look over here, we can see that everything that I wanted to correspond, and the way that I know that I did it correctly, is because it's all in ascending order, because that's the way I want it, the way that I create my dinner chases, because in this particular example, none of these are moving head fixtures. They're all just stationary, static washes. So we got one, it's going from 1, 2, 3, 4, then 7, 8, 9, and 10. Then over here, I've got 11, 12, 13, 14, then 27, 28, 29, and 30. So if we look at the same syntax, clone fixture 3,301 through 3,304, so those guys, plus 3,307 through 3,310, so it's now that other grouping here, so this first grouping will go with the first grouping that I did over here, and the second grouping will go with the second grouping that I did over here. So at 511 through 514, plus the 527 through 530. And please is just, on the MA, we don't have an enter button, we have a please button. It's I think it's just a joke at angry programmers. So through this, we will have effectively gone and been able to clone all of the information that was based off of all my initial layouts and be able to go and effectively, regularly use different lighting rigs, designs made by other people, and be able to get a similar product from day to day. I want to thank you all for listening to my presentation, and I will happily take any questions that you have.
Okay, great. We do have some questions here.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is asking, how do you turn off all playbacks and effects after a song to start fresh for the next one? Do you have a special macro?
I don't, actually. I don't turn everything off. There's never a point where I actually do that. If you're referring to how I black out everything, actually, I'm going to just jump to this and make it a little easier. Right here are all my faders. As we can see, they're up. I will literally pull them all down, whatever I'm trying to not use. And so if I'm in the middle of a movement pattern, as well as a dimmer chase, which is flashable, so I'm actually actively holding that button down, I will stop holding that button, I'll toggle off the movement, and I will pull everything out except for, let's say, my downstage wash or whatever I want to use to highlight wherever the artist is standing or whatever, and it will just park. So I do it, as with everything else, on the fly and very quickly.
All right, next question. How long did it take you to develop your current busking methodology?
The entirety of my lighting design career, or my lighting career, which I started in 2016. Yeah, 2016 is when I started, and I started learning how to program probably halfway through that year. And so it's been years of me developing this and learning it, watching tutorial videos on how to even implement the ideas that I want to, how to put things where years is the answer.
Okay, next question is asking, how do you decide what number of source fixtures to use when you are preparing your show file?
So, this is really up to you. It's up to everybody as to what types of rigs you're regularly tackling. Me personally, I'm coming across this is not 100% meant for festivals. I've actually gone and edited this a lot to deal with festivals because of just the sheer quantity of fixtures at them. So I base it on the types of venues I know I'm going to be going to, and just something that is a nice even number. So like 10, 8, 6, and I'm able to go in and take those numbers and duplicate them over the rig. So let's say it's 10 and I've got 20 fixtures in the rig. I'll do like every other one and go and just spread the information across the entirety of the rig.
Okay, next question is asking, how much time would you spend daily on cloning, and how much prep time would you spend on patching, 3D layouts, etc.?
So it just depends on the size of the rig. So on a quick day, if it's only going to be I've only got like 10 or 20 fixtures, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. And in regards to patching, it really just depends. In regards to patching in the 3D views, it depends on whether or not the venue itself has an MA programmer in-house, because if they do, I can PSR their partial show read, their show file over into my file, which basically means I can take and choose what information I want to take out of their file, and that could be layout views, that can be whole queues if I want, which I don't like doing because I like using that stuff. And so if I were to say how long, like if there's no MA file in the house, I could be cloning and editing and moving everything around for an hour or two, just to make sure it's all calibrated the way that I want it to do, the way that I'd like it. Not to say that there aren't ways to write macros to clone for you, but I change up where I want to clone things so much in so many different ways that that particular method just doesn't work for me.
Okay, next question is asking, how much previs or pre-production went into this design? How much work was tweaking on the site?
If we're going to talk about hours, I'll say days. If you were to just measure it in actual time spent, literally days worth of time. And then well, I'm sorry, could you say the last part of that question again?
Yeah, how much work was tweaking on site?
A lot. A lot is the answer. I play with everything as much as I can. We would specifically get me really early load-ins. And when I say really early, I'm saying like doors are at 8, we'd be in by like noon. The build is done in like, let's say, my end of the build, it only takes me like 45 to an hour, but the video and the sound and all that other stuff takes another couple hours. And I can't actively be playing with all of the lighting stuff while everyone's on there. So, I'd say I would spend as much time as I humanly could every day playing with everything. So let's spitball to 2 to 3 hours if I'm having a good day, and that's because I'm having fun.
All right, the next one's asking, can you talk about the load-in, load-out process for the Subtronics tour, packs, touring, local crews, start and finish times?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start with the truck pack, I suppose. We always start with video. I send video in first along with the truss and my base plates to immediately begin the build. So I'd be in the truck. Mind you, on the tour we had a very small crew. So it would be, in regards to the build, it is myself and my production manager. We had no one else. My tour manager is very capable. He is also our VJ, and definitely knows the ins and outs on the technology, but he's also our tour manager, so he has to do a bunch of other stuff. So he would help us if we were having a bad day, if we were having bad load-in. So start with video, get that built immediately. Then we'd probably use like 6 stagehands a day probably. And so as soon as we have enough stuff in there for them to start building, I'd send 3 to go start working with my production manager, and we get the rest of the gear off the truck, roll that in there. Hopefully by the time I'm in there, finally like in the venue, they've got all of our totems, the base plates with truss, set up for me to be able to basically just eyeball where I'd like them to be sitting for the day, because we've got different widths on the stages. And I'd start building my end. They'd probably be a quarter of the way through building the video wall at that point. And we just move on through that. So in regards to local crews, we would deal with, I don't want to use the word deal with, we would get to work with so many different kinds of people, so many different skill levels, and this is in part why I would ask for such an early load-in, because sometimes I'd walk into a venue and there'd be college kids who had 0 stagehand experience, or they were literally barbacks, like who if I say, can you put these fixtures on the downstage edge in ascending numerical order from stage right to stage left, they have no idea what I'm talking about. They understood ascending numerical order. None of the rest of it. And then other days we'd be dealing with local union boys and girls, and they would knock it out of the park. And all I'm doing is just setting up like cables, putting fixtures, like just I'm like, all right, these ones go here, and they just do it so fast, and my day would be so easy and so fun. But I also, where I came from and how I learned was I had 0 knowledge when I started doing all this a couple of years ago. I walked into the Canopy Club, and our stage manager was like, who are you? And I had 0 knowledge, but I was the lighting designer for the venue. So I would take every opportunity that I had to learn anything that I could, whether it be about electrical or just rigging or building stuff. I would essentially be a stagehand, just to learn, just for the pure learning aspect of it. So I very much so am of the philosophy that it's really important to spread and share information as kindly as you can, because this kid, but you run into an 18-year-old, and maybe you're going to be the reason that kid wants to go and become a lighting designer, and ends up out on tour and becomes this another, not you, but like somebody who really enjoys their job and is passionate about it. In regards to loadouts, so load-ins would take us about, let's just spitball and say 4 hours, and loadouts on a good day, an hour and 20. And mind you, these are late shows. We're going till like 2 a.m. And so we're not out till, especially if like the time zone changes or something silly like that, to like 3 or 4 in the morning, and then we got loaded again. I think I answered all of that. That was a long question, so I'm not.
Yep, I think you got it. All right, I have another one that's a two-parter. What is your biggest fear when you first walk into a venue, and also what makes you happiest when you first enter a venue?
The biggest fear. So I'm a part of the advancing process, so I do know what's coming, advance. But the worst possible things that I could see, for one, is no cam locks. If we don't have a way for me to plug in my distro, I'm going to have to be calculating power based on circuits and fuses that I don't for sure know are actually good or that can actually hold, the amount of amperage that I'm pulling. As well as, uneven stages. Those are, for ground-based video walls, it's horrific. So basically, yeah, those are what I really don't like seeing. And then also, if there's an MA2 in-house, that's awesome, because then I don't have to bring in my desk, usually, which is, always think about the out when it comes to loading in these shows. You want to get out as fast as you can, because you want to rest. You want to be. Don't get me wrong. I love doing these shows. I love doing all this stuff. But it's just how you do this. Like, you want to go in fast. You want to come out quickly. Did I? Okay. Sorry, my screen timed out for a second. One second. Could you repeat the question again? I got a little lost there. I apologize.
Yep. It was just asking your biggest fear when you walk into a venue. What makes you happiest?
Right. So yeah, biggest fear is not having power and having a small or uneven stage. And the best things I could see is we are good on power. We are good on the stage is nice and level. It's nice and new. They've got nice new fixtures. I've walked into venues that are stacked with like 20 axioms and like another, 15 or whatever auras, and we've got just this amazing rig that I would love to be a house designer at, just because I get to play with it all the time. And having an actual like MA2 desk in house, as well as the other thing that I really like seeing are the friends that I've made on the road. People that I've developed over the years, or people who've seen me develop over the years, and they see me and they're like, "Oh, dude, you're still around. Not only are you still around, but you know stuff now." Yeah.
Okay, next question is asking if you can explain the power distro used for the Subtronics tour.
We used a Motion Labs variable 208 distro that we got from LEC Chicago. I always, if I can, run everything at 208. 208 is a voltage, if you don't know. You can run it at 110 or you can run it at 208. If you run it at 208, you're able to put more stuff on a circuit, more or less is what that means. And it allows me to have a lot of redundancy. I run everything out of Sockoplex, which is a really thick, annoying cable, if anybody knows what I'm talking about, I assume you do, that we'd run across the stage, and we'd use a L6 breakout, and then those breakouts I'd go and just do cable drops across the stage to power all the lighting. We did usually run the video on 110. That was the preference of my production manager. Yeah, it was a really nice distro. Highly recommend. Motion Labs is great.
Okay, next question. Do you have a default get out of jail look to easily grab if needed? If so, what does it look like?
It is blue. It is blue and it is straight down. That means I'm in trouble. Like I use the word lost in the sauce a lot. I have been using the same general scheme for how I lay out my shows the entire time that I've been doing this. One, in part because, no, literally, it's because I want to be able to know where I am and what I'm doing. I know how my cues are running. I know how they're turning on or how they turn off. So I rarely have to do that. The default like chill look, it means that I'm dealing with something that got over my head, if you would. So over the course of the Subtronics story, I'm going to deviate here for a second. We had our A-rig never lived on the truck. It doesn't exist. The A-rig consisted of 4 different designs that myself, my production manager, and my tour manager all worked on. And we would get quotes from, like Four Wall or LEC or whatever vendor we could find, and we would implement these designs on the day of show, and I'd be cloning, like I was talking about before, into a rig that I designed, but there's always weird little things that don't work exactly right or whatever, and I have that's when I would say that I get myself lost in the sauce and have to jump back to those default looks.
Okay, next question is asking any advice for building a generic busking file without a specific show in mind?
Everything that I went over in this presentation is the answer to that. So, you're going to want to have some basic positions. You're going to want to have basic color palettes. So, that would cover different parts of the rig. So, let's say you've got, like I do in mine, axioms, auras, and LED strobes. Then you go and create color cues dedicated to each of those groupings, and then you're able to just sit there and, it's simpler than mine, but you just go yellow for the auras, orange for the axioms, and, blue for the strobes, and now you have yourself a little color palette plus your positions, and then definitely have movement patterns. You want some movement patterns, especially if you're dealing with EDM, but my stuff's high energy, so you might not actually necessarily need those. When it comes to just the broad generalization of shows in and of themselves. But this whole show file is based off of a file that I built at the Canopy Club, where I was the house lighting designer and would have to regularly do lighting for bands that I'd never heard of before. And, sometimes they're fast, sometimes they're slow, sometimes it's hip-hop, sometimes it's EDM. And, yeah, so color palettes, positions, throw some gobos in there, gobo scrolls, gobo rotate, color wheel scrolls, intensity bumps for all fixture groupings. So, you got your movers with your spots, or let's say you got your spots, you got your beams, you got washes. Just have bumps for those so that you can easily turn them on and, create a dynamic sort of flow to your show. Okay, the next question is asking if you can recap how you use your in and out buttons. Okay, so I'm just going to come back to it. In and out. So in is literally, if we were to, can you guys see my mouse when I move it around? That's what I'm. Yeah. Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure. So in would literally be like everything in here, and then out would be everything outside of there. Okay. So when I click that button, it flashes on that group. When I let go, it turns it off. When I click, and it goes for in and out, and I literally will sit there and tap. It's like boom, boom, and it looks like, if I'm doing it right, it looks like not only is it actually in time to the music, but I'm able to transition quickly from that sort of dimmer, the intensity bumps, to other ones, so such as my G1 and G2. So I use them to accent, snare drum, to accent, just like drum hits like or and so I bounce around between the ins and outs, my G1s and G2s, and all of these guys right here. So that's for my house movers. I actually didn't fully explain these. The house movers, which are these guys up here, the red ones on the my truss. The mid-stage movers, which would be these little pyramid-y looking guys, and the bottom movers, which would be what would be most likely positioned downstage center, or just across the downstage. And I just bounce between all these things in conjunction with all the other effects that I use. Okay, next question is asking if you can talk about the biggest technical issue you've encountered on tour. Oh boy. The worst that I ever had was very specific. Oh man, this is the weirdest problem I've ever dealt with, literally. Okay, so the problem started off with my vendor. I asked him for flow-throughs, which are jumpers for axioms. and they were True One power jumpers, to which I asked him for them, and he said that would work just fine. Then I get the fixtures on site, and I find that there are no flow-through ports on the axioms. I had, it was a long week, and I had forgotten that those fixtures didn't have you couldn't flow through. You can't jump from fixture to fixture on those unless it's like customized to do such, and they weren't. So I had all these flow-throughs, and I needed to power this rig, and I sat down and doodled out like this whole power plot, and I'm guiding like 20 stagehands to help me build this thing. And now I've bumped into a problem where I can't just tell, stagehands just go and start plugging everything in. That doesn't work because you got to disperse your power evenly across your distro. Otherwise, you start flipping breakers. So I'm sitting there having to crunch numbers on how I'm going to use the twoffers that I have to connect together all of these fixtures. I had probably like 24 axioms in that ground package, and while simultaneously we also needed to get everything dated, all the data needed to be cabled. So I had the house LD, who I found out was a touring LD. He was very competent and extremely skilled. This was at the Tabernacle in Atlanta, Georgia. And we ran into a very strange issue where my Universe 1, which consisted of 4 axioms and probably, let's just say 10 moving ahead washes. And the axioms, their data was malfunctioning and they weren't working right or whatever, and they were just fine, they were patched just fine, but then the moving ahead washes that were daisy chained after the axioms in the chain were working just fine. It was one of the strangest problems I've ever seen. We all nearly had like panic attacks about it because it took us over 45 minutes to figure it out, and doors were very, very safe. And what it turned out to be was the home run, which makes, in hindsight, upon finding out about why this happened, it makes sense. But at the time, it made no sense at all, in that we switched out the home run that was going to my split that was heading to, that was going down the snake to front house. And we switched that out, and then everything worked just fine. But what's really weird is that when you daisy chain fixtures together, if something is wrong in the chain, if there's some data bouncing around funny, you're going to get problems through everything after the problem or before the problem. And data termination is a potential error there. We didn't have terminators that day. And what it turned out is the axioms themselves, I believe, are RVMable, and due to that, the data just it was a bad DMX cable is basically the best way for me to put it, but the problem just looked so strange because the fixtures after the axioms were working just fine and they were all in the same chain. Yeah, that was an anxiety attack almost.
Okay, we have a couple more. Do you use the Aura feature on the Martin Aura and Atomic LED?
Do I use the Aura? So I'm sorry. Can we specifically go over what the Aura? Are you referring to multi-instance mode for the Auras? Is that what we're getting at?
I don't have any specification there. Brad, is that something you can maybe fill in?
Yeah. Hi, Juan. This is Brad. Hi. I think the question is asking on the Aura and on the Atomic LED. There's what's called the Aura effect, where you can glow the color underneath the main output.
Yes. No, I almost never use that particular function unless, particularly because it doesn't clone well. It doesn't copy well onto other fixtures because a whole bunch of fixtures don't have that function. It is a really cool feature. I like it, but what it really gets down to is if I had a rig where I'm consistently using those fixtures all the time versus me using this 3D rig that I literally always use. So the answer is no. No, I do not regularly use that.
Okay, and then it looks like we have a final question. As you tour, do you move forward with your daily clone show file or revert back each day to your original file?
Revert. I try to revert back as much as I can, but there are days where I pick up new fixtures or I make some new tricks, and I want to keep that, but I'll end up honestly PSRing my own show file into my other file just to grab those pieces, just because things get really muddy if you keep just using the same file day after day after day, because you will lose pieces, you'll accidentally delete things, or you did delete things because you didn't need them, and it adds up to a rather large mess. So keep that base show file, keep jumping back to it, and make the adjustments as best you can after the shows. You know, I sit on a bus and I just hang out and play with lights as I always do.
Okay, thank you so much, Juan. That was a really great presentation. We appreciate having you on our series.
Thank you.
Juan's contact information is up on the screen. It sounds like he's open to receiving additional questions via email. So if you think of anything else, if you want to jot down that email address and just reach out to him directly. And if you're interested in catching any of our upcoming webinars, you can go out to pro.harman.com and see the full calendar. So thanks again, Juan, and thank you everyone for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.